Hi, I'm Chloe Crawford, and this is my submission for the fourth SPIA Notes module, Reflection. So our objectives were to describe aspects of the economic dimension of the city and discuss how economic trends and factors could shape the future of U.S. and other cities, as well as reflect on the role of economic systems in cities and how they shape cities. And we needed to evaluate the required materials with points that interest or trouble us, and reflect on some of the economic trends suggested by the required material. So for chapter 2, the changing economic context of cities, I learned that cities used to be small-scale settlements that relied heavily on medieval ideals. A big talk in that one was the pre-industrial city, and talked about how, contrary to one of the other modules that we did, the inner circle of this one was made up of religious, political, administrative, and social chairs of the city, and anyone that had money was the inside of the circle. And as it went out, more the people who didn't have a dominant or some sort of dominant position was more towards the outskirts of the city. So I think it's cool how that changed over time. And they talked about a man named Vance who questioned the relationships that spawned from the organizations. He thought the city was many-centered, and each group of people created tight occupational clusters. Also talked about how the separated groups have minor impact on the social geography of the city. And a pre-economic logic turned the urban structure inside out from the pre-industrial model. And this happened where the rich and poor switched places location-wise. Again, like I said, that was pretty interesting how things changed. The most fundamental change to emerge in this reading was the rise of capitalism and its new system of production, which enabled two new social groups to come about, which were the industrialist capitalists and the unskilled factory workers. These were the formed basis of new elite and proletariat groups. The land use with the emergence of factories and warehouses became crucial, and land was given to those who could pay rent. It was no longer given to the traditional ruling religious groups, things like that. And homes weren't being used as workplaces anymore. Neighborhoods created status division, and wealthier individuals wanted to move to the urban fringe to create distance between themselves and the lower class people. This also talked about Karl Marx and his theories of the underlying economic base of society, which was also known as the mode of production. Talked about the forces of production, which was technology associated with the production process, as well as relations of production, which was a legal system that governed the whole means of production. Also talked about superstructure, which is a wider set of social arrangements in a society. I didn't particularly understand that well, but I guess a little bit more reading can help that out. And there was a key principle in this reading that talked about capitalism being a set of social relations that affected the relationship between two classes in conflict, which enables owners of capital to command labor to produce further wealth. But this was hard to operate and also controversial. In the reading, America's cities have always been changing, and COVID took them in a new direction. There's actually a video talked about population migration from larger cities to smaller ones and how remote work is bringing people to seek out more space and a lower cost of living. More neglected cities will be benefiting. And a lot of people stayed within the same state. Like during COVID, people stayed within the same state, they just moved farther out, which was a trend that COVID helped accelerate. In chapter 3, the national economy, world economy, talked about the productivity declining in the United States and how we no longer dominate the world's economy. A big point was that yesterday is over and now we are just living in a world of interdependent communities, and we cannot recapture the title that we once held being a world economy leader because we're no longer an industrial economy and we're constantly changing, and we can't really go back to the past. We just have to keep moving forward and adapting to what we need. There's a twofold change occurring in the U.S. We're shifting from being isolated, self-reliant, to part of an interdependent global economy, which means giving up the dominant role as a world dominant force and instead becoming an economically strong country, which few countries are. So that's our current focus. The growing workforce of the third world countries is fueling their industrial drive. A lot of these countries are starting to emerge and take on that industrial role that we've already fulfilled, but now they're just now being able to fill. In fact, China is emerging as a textile manufacturing leader, and a lot of the world's auto industry is becoming globalized, which is great. And in Are Green Cities Nice Places to Live? Examining the link between urban sustainability and quality of life by Dr. David Bierry. He talked about how climate change needs will have economic impacts and how we need public policy help, but it's hard to prioritize this because large investments are needed to make projects like this happen, especially with the current financial crisis that we're in. And there were some sustainability indicator categories that were economic indicators, which are things like employment, energy consumption, environmental indicators, which are standards for clean air, water, waste, some social indicators, crime, educational attainment, and health outcomes. And the measures of greenness of cities are unsuitable for a policy purpose due to the fact that they lack a firm theoretical anchor. In the additional reading, Do Cities Have a Future? It talked about cities being shaped by the necessity of production and power within prevailing relationships among classes and groups rather than leader wants. Marx was also referenced in this reading, and again talked about the forces of production that Marx had theorized, and also summarized the current problems that we have in cities as an outcome due to the fact that relations of production have not adapted to correctly meet new developments in forces of production. So the people who make money off of this system are holding on to it, and they fear letting it go because they're afraid of the unknown. And talked about how immigrants are exploited for their work and how workers are paid little wages, which leads to more profit for businesses and the growth of the system. A big result of this was the Fordist Compromise in the 50s, which had factory workers in major industries getting better wages so that they could buy the goods that they're producing, and then they were able to keep the factories profitable while keeping good peace between both unions and management. However, some of the workers continued to be paid unfairly, so that's when social agencies and philanthropic housing groups came through with incentives. But in the 60s, as time went on, the Fordist Compromise broke down, class relations changed, and with development, we no longer needed skilled workers, which reduced wages and employment growth declined. And workers are now being replaced by machines in the modern day. And pretty sure that covers just about everything that I learned. I thought everything was very interesting to read about. Most of it was understanding, or most of it I understood, but I guess I'll just have to keep reading to fill in the gaps of what I didn't quite get. Thank you.